Alright, so at this point it's time to flare the brake lines. Now, I'd gotten the tool from the auto parts that like you clamp here and then you turn a little thing to flare, and it really sucks because there's nothing to guarantee that it goes down straight. It keeps tilting and you're not guaranteed a good flare. So what I ended up doing was I spent a little money and I got myself one of these proper flaring tools. Now, it has this little portion here at the bottom that's for you to clamp it into a vise. So let me show you how that goes. Pretty straightforward, right? You just turn the vise until it's held in place. This thing was like, I don't know, 130, 150 bucks on Amazon if I remember correctly. You don't want to use this, buy this if you're only going to do this once, but you know, I feel like bending custom brake lines might be a thing in my future, so I'm going to go with buying it, right? So we'll put this little guy on. Now, the lines that I have are 3/16 in diameter. My local auto parts normally had lines that are 3/16 in diameter with an M10x1 fitting and the inverted flare, aka double flare. However, lately they don't have any, and I went to a few different Autozones. It is quite possible that I just bought them out of it the last time that I did this. So what I did was I bought a line of the right length that had the right flare, wrong fittings, cut off one end, put on the correct fittings, and now I'm going to flare this. Then on the other line, it was unfortunately bubble flared on both sides, so I do have to add the fittings and flare both ends, but that's what this nice fancy tool is for. So I will take my 3/16 die. There's a few different dies in here. Now, when you put this in the machine, you don't want the separate sections pointing up. You want one on the bottom, one on top. You will pull this, undo that. Now there's kind of like a little taper on one end and the other end's kind of flat. For this type of flare, I want this. So I'll pop it in. I'll push this over to operation 0. Alright. And I'll put my other die and then move this guy over and lock it back in place. Now I will butt the tube up against operation 0 and kind of lightly clamp this here in the vise. Right now, with it lightly clamped, it can still slide. So what I'll do, you want it to slide, right? You'll go ahead and pop in your lever and you just push it, and what it's going to do is it's going to flush the end of the tube up against the dies, which is exactly where you want it for your flaring operation. Then you tighten this down so that your tube can't go anywhere. Now, if you do this, you're going to want your vise to be bolted down to the table, by the way, because if you try to flare on these steel lines and your vise is not bolted to the table, all you're going to do is rotate your vise. I might still, even though it's bolted to the table, makeshift table that I have on my work area, and that is bolted to what's below, but not in the strongest way. So I'm doing 3/16 line, so I want to look for the operation 1 for 3/16 line. That's here, op 1. So as you can see, that's operation 1 for 3/16. I'm going to go ahead and pull the lever and perform that, and then I'll switch over to operation 2 for 3/16 and do the same thing. Here comes the fun or not so fun part, and that is if we're going to be able to flare at all without this sliding out and without destroying this table. We'll see. Make sure this is kind of going in straight, and man, alright, I think I did something. This probably did roll a little bit, but let's see. Let's try operation 2 for 3/16. And pop that open. Hope I didn't ruin it. So, this does not look like my other one. It's definitely an inverted flare, but I don't know that this is what I want. I'm gonna mess with it a little bit and see if maybe the Operation 1 didn't go the way I wanted it to. Yeah, it's seated against the die real nice. I mean, ultimately the real test is to see if it will seal. I don't expect this to be perfect, but let's mess with it some more and I'll let you guys know how that goes. Alright, so it took a couple of tries. I had to cut the end off twice. One time I got it really good, but unfortunately the flare was lopsided. So then what I did was I cut that end off. I knew what I needed to do now. You gotta make sure you clamp all the way down and you pull that bar. You gotta make sure it's in there real tight, and this time around it's perfect. It's not cockeyed. Fits, it's nice and flush on the fitting. That's what I wanted to see, so this line's ready to be bent. We'll do the same with the other line and then we'll go bent. Alright, so what I ended up discovering was that the real thing to do is to put a breaker bar on the lever, right, for the flaring tool, and make sure you turn that thing all the way over, and that will make sure that you get kind of like a domed end on the tube on Operation 1. Then when you go to Operation 2, it'll, you know, kind of crush it over and you'll get the perfect double flare that you wanted. So unfortunately my camera ran out of battery and I could not find any spare or charger. Turns out it was in my book bag, derp. Anywho, that means that I did need to keep working because I am on a schedule with this. So what I've done is I've gone ahead and custom bent these lines. It's not super difficult to do. You buy a little piping bender, you put it in there and you just kind of like bend the stuff over. That one I did buy, like, or I've had rather, but I bought it back in the day at AutoZone. It's the standard little green bending pliers by OEM Tools. Really simple to bend this stuff with that, and some of the bending, like the final, you know, alignment to get it to just be perfect to come into this master cylinder, I actually just bent it a little by hand, right, to just get that final little kink in there. Obviously not kink the tube, but rather, you know, a little bend to just perfectly align this sort of thread in smoothly, and it's not a battle. So I did that. Now, with that done, I had to undo these, and the reason is that I went ahead and put these plugs in here so that I could then add fluid, push the brake pedal over and over until the air got out of here. That's to bleed the master cylinder. Then basically took those plugs out with a rag underneath, right, because when you do that they're obviously going to leak. Put these lines in, like threaded them back in, got them nice and tight, and then went about bleeding the brakes at all four corners. Started in the passenger side rear, moved to the driver side rear, passenger side front, driver side front. That's pretty much the layout on the Tacoma. Other vehicles can change. Some people argue that as long as you bleed every corner it doesn't matter and you don't get air at every corner. Follow whatever your user manual tells you to do and you'll most likely be fine. Again, take no responsibility for your final results. I did have to take out my clutch line that crosses around here so I could get the larger rear line in here. That means I had to drain my fluid out of the reservoir for the clutch, and then of course I had to re-bleed this. Super easy to do with my pressure bleeder. I'll show you guys that. I've shown it in other videos. It's always worth seeing, however. So this is the Power Pro BA10. They're not paying me a penny, but I'm going to give them a shout out anyway because this is a great product. You put this thing on here, you turn these little knobs here to just grip the ends, and then you turn the center one and it just, like, you know, expands this O-ring and like grabs the inside of the reservoir well. Then you just connect this end to your compressor. I use about 12.5 psi, don't exceed that. You can actually burst your reservoir with too much pressure. And then I literally go around all the corners and bleed, and you don't need anyone to pump the brakes. I do feel sometimes that it's not the most effective with the Tacoma's master cylinder. Maybe I'm old school, maybe I'm just so finicky with pedal feel, but I still like to finish it off by having a friend come over and pump the pedal just a couple times, but you literally only need them to pump a couple times per corner instead of a whole bunch of times after you did it with this, because
I get clean fluid out of, you know, every single corner real quick doing this. And then the clutch, like, you need no one. This fits on the clutch as well. It's the same size cap. And let me tell you, like, instantaneous bled clutch. No need to, you know, spend a lot of time pumping or any of that nonsense. It's fantastic on that. I'm not sure why brakes is a little different. Maybe if I had the stock Tacoma brakes, it would be instantaneous too. Because I do have big 4-piston Brembos up front, it might just be a slightly different story. But either way, I will get that pumped out as soon as I get a friend, and then we're going to take this sucker for a spin and we're going to see how it does. I'm very curious to see how this is going to perform now that I switched back to the Tacoma one. I did turn the truck on and hit the pedal just to see how it would feel. And admittedly, the pedal feel is not exactly what I want, but I've been battling that with this truck forever. I do remember that I used this booster to practice turning the master cylinder pin, so it is possible that I may have to adjust that, you know, booster to master pin clearance a little bit. Kind of sucks, but you can actually do that without undoing any of this. You just undo the bolts and kind of force it forward, and then you can turn a wrench in there. I may do that, I may not. I'm going to mess around, make sure my pedal play and everything is correct. But other than that, this really should brake really well and cause no problems. One thing you got to keep in mind if you do decide to adjust the booster to pin clearance is just that, like, it can't be perfectly tight from the beginning. There always needs to be some kind of gap, because what will happen is once your brake fluid comes up to temperature from you braking, it will expand, and when it does that, this will expand, and then it'll be as if you're pushing the brake without you pushing the brake. So your brakes will start to drag, and suddenly you actually won't be able to drive forward because your brakes will be clamped down so tight. Happened to me a lot with the SC one, and I discovered that in the case of the SC Master and Booster, at least the combination that I had, you had to literally turn the pin down all the way to have the maximum gap in order for it to not do that. I don't remember what it is on the Tacoma. Again, follow the manual. However, we'll see. In any case, once this is set up like this, it's not like you can control the gap accurately. You really could just space this off and turn it, the little pin a turn or two, and hope that it works. So I might have to be doing some of that fine tuning, which sucks, but it's not the end of the world. So we'll see where we end up with that, and I will follow up with you guys in another video just so that you can see how it ended up. Now, the SC setup isn't bad. You could definitely run it. I'm sure if you have Brembos and rear calipers, it probably feels fantastic. You do have to eliminate your load sensing proportioning valve, LSPV. Either disable it or completely eliminate it and put an adjustable one like I did. I don't think you would ever just run a straight line back there and not have an adjustable valve of any kind, because if I had to guess, then you would have way too much rear brake bias, because that would be just like what was happening with my LSPV, thinking that I had a load in the bed. So my suggestion is always have a valve back there, unless you really have a reason why you want rear brake bias, and I don't really think that's smart. You're gonna spin, have an accident. Don't do that. But yeah, that's basically it for this setup. I'm going to go probably bleed it out a little with a friend and then test drive. If I like it, I'll leave it. If I don't like it, I'll adjust it, and I'll let you guys know what I did. If you want to see more about this project, you want to keep following it, feel free to hit like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so that you're notified when I post up another video. If you have any feedback or questions, feel free to leave that in the comments section. And as always, thank you guys for watching.